Welcome back, my friends, to The Whim. I'm Jonathan Sorsey, narrator and author of Wandering the Whim. The Whim is a set of fantastical, floating worlds, brimming with strange and beautiful creatures, perilous places, and brave adventurers. As a reminder, if you want to read along, or want to discover other unrecorded stories, you can head to wanderingthewhim.wordpress.com. But without further ado, the title of today's story is The White Knight. It's amazing what a few buttons can buy. Miles and his friend Buns walked briskly back toward the orphanage from school. Miles wanted to sink into the ground. He wasn't sure what had possessed him to trip Jurg McGill, the school bully, that day. Maybe he had enough of his swagger, or maybe some part of him was trying to catch Sally Sims' attention. Perhaps it was the gnome-made pastry that Robbie had traded him at lunch. Or maybe it was just fate. Whatever it was, he had regretted it almost instantly. But fortunately, Mrs. Japple had been there to keep Jurg from punching him right there and then. Despite this restraint, Jurg had quickly made his intentions clear. Now Miles simply hoped that he and Buns could slip away without encountering any further trouble. "Hey you, Miles!" Miles and Buns stopped mid-stride, both swallowing hard. Miles turned to face the familiar voice, while Buns peeked out from behind him. Some distance behind them, near a ramshackle house, Jurg stood, surrounded by a gaggle of his minions. Jurg took a bite from the raw onion he was holding and crunched it obnoxiously. "What, Jurg?" said Miles, trying to look unafraid.
"He's dead tomorrow, isn't he, Jurg?"
said one of his goons, a small boy with thin, spiky hair. He rubbed one of his sticky fingers across his throat, but it looked less menacing and more like he was scratching at a scab. "He sure is," said Jurg loudly, spit and onion shrapnel flying from his mouth. A few bounced off the little goon's face, causing him to retreat to the rear of the group. "Remember, 4 o'clock behind the old windmill. Don't be late. I've got things to do and places to be after I beat you up." Miles doubted that. Jurg was a bully. And the thing about bullies is that they don't have any better things to do or people to see than the ones they decide to beat up. That was why he was chewing on an onion now. He said he liked the flavor, but nobody really liked raw onions, except for ogres. And Jurg, bad as he was still no ogre. So Miles knew the onion munching must really have been because Jurg didn't have anything better to do. "Oh, I'm sure," said Miles, his voice cracking. Jurg continued. "And Buns, didn't I tell you not to show your face around here anymore? You're so ugly, they ought to run you out of town. I should come over there and give you a good punch right in the chin. Maybe that'd make it look better. Now get!" Jurg lobbed the onion at Buns, hitting him right on the nose with a flunk. Buns squeaked like a squashed chipmunk and clutched at his wounded sniffer. "I'm going, see?" he said, fleeing. He and Miles half ran, half walked to the corner of the dirt road where they turned to head back home to the orphanage. It would be supper time soon, and Ms. Chortle didn't allow the children in her care to be late for meals. The two boys did not stop running until they came to the fishmonger's shop. A crowd of stinky old men huddled around the shop, peering in at the nervous fish swimming around in their buckets and pails. Nobody ever seemed to buy the fish, except when the caravans of bumpins came in from Hod, but the old men loved looking at them.
"Holy burgles, Miles! Jurg's really got it out for you,"
Buns finally said, still clutching his nose. "Thanks, I couldn't tell," said Miles.
"He's probably been wanting to make an example out of someone for a while. He'll get all his goons to go around town and make sure all the kids from everywhere will be there after school."
"I just hope Miss Chortle doesn't find out about it," said Miles. "She'll keep me from going, and that'd be worse than getting beat. I'd never hear the end of it if that happened. It'd be a miracle if none of the little kids tell her, though. Especially Susie."
"Yeah,"
said Buns limply.
"It's definitely a no-win situation. But hey, at least you did something to deserve it. Man, I'd give anything to see that look on his face again, right after you tripped him. Well, not anything. I'm glad I'm not the one who has to fight him. But, I'd give something, I guess. I don't know, maybe like that old pair of underwear that's too small for me. Or that apple I've been saving in our room for later. "Aw, man, that was you?" said Miles. "Dude, that's nasty. That's why it smells like what in there? I thought a lizard had crawled in and died." It's just the apple. Well, that and my socks. But it hasn't started growing fuzz on it yet, so it's probably still okay." "No, man, it's rotten." You never know with fruit. It could still be good. Just like with Jurg. There's always a chance of you beating him." "No, there's not, Buns," said Miles. "I've got absolutely no chance. Maybe if I was taller, bigger, maybe. But not the way things are now. Remember what happened to Nika Gulgop? He had no chance, and I don't neither. Man, I wish I'd never tripped him. What was I thinking? This is the worst. And there ain't a way out of it either. I've got my cake, and now I'll have to sleep in it, too." "I don't think that's how the saying goes," said Buns, fiddling with the buttons on his coat. They were very nice buttons, even Miles had to admit. "Oh, whatever. I'm not a fighter. I mean, not like Jurg is. He just fights with people because he wants to, and something's bananas with his brains. Not me. I only fight because I have to. Like the scuffles I've got into with Thomas Scumbuck. What's his deal with stealing all my stuff, anyway? But he's only 8 and a lot smaller than I am. Jurg? Pfft, he's a different matter, totally. I've got 0 chance against a 14-year-old. Plus, he's got the biggest hands I've ever seen. Even bigger than the butcher." "The butcher does have some pretty big hands," said Buns. "I always wonder how he doesn't cut his hands when he works with the meat." Miles shrugged. "I overheard him say his hands used to be bigger." They walked on a little further in silence. Miles wished he could change places with someone, wished he could escape the fight, the town, the orphanage, all of it. There was magic for that sort of thing, he had heard. Some sort of gum magic. That's why the gumballs were always sold out around town. Everyone bought them up, hoping one would be magic. But even if there had been any, Miles didn't have any money for gum. At this point, though, even shrinking down and becoming one of the grains of sand in the dirt road underfoot seemed appealing. As a grain, Miles would stay safe until the danger was past. Or maybe he would let himself get picked up by someone's shoe and ride to some exotic part of the world, out where the firefalls and the cat colonies were. The life of a sand grain seemed much more exciting than his own. He had no adventure and nothing to look forward to. But he didn't think there was magic for turning anyone into sand. Certainly not for turning them back again. He couldn't ride out to the edges of the world. Instead, he was stuck living in a crowded orphanage, always guarding his knickknacks from Thomas and trying to find the rotten apple Buns had misplaced. He remembered Ms. Chortle once saying something about crucial moments that defined your life, like when she took in her first child. After that, more and more just showed up, and they were all such a blessing. Tomorrow would be a moment sort of like that, but of the bad sort. If Jurg beat him up, Miles knew he would do it again and again. He'd have his lunch stolen, and worms drop down his shirt, and all sorts of other awful things. And he could forget about trying to impress Sally Sims forever. "Hey." Miles stopped and looked around. He could swear he had heard a voice. A gruff, unfamiliar voice. It was gravelly and almost oily. A thick, gummed-up oil, like tar or old butter dropped into the dirt. He didn't see anyone around, though, except for a couple of kids chasing a ratbird down the street. "Why'd you stop?" said Buns, giving him an odd look. "I thought I heard something, a voice." "Psst! Hey, kid. You, in the blue boots." "There it is again," said Miles. He glanced down. He was wearing his blue boots. He didn't really have much choice since Buns had borrowed his other pair and forgotten where he had left them. "I hear it too," said Buns. "Where's it coming from?" "Back here in the alley," the voice croaked. Miles glanced about, but the only alley he could see was an odd gap, about 2 feet wide, between 2 houses. There was nothing in it, except an assortment of stones, bones, rags, and other rubbish. Near the entrance, a rather large snail sat on the dirt.
It looked as if it was beckoning to them.
"The snail?" said Buns.
"Yep, that's me, down here," said the voice. "Hurry up and come in."
Miles tried not to make a habit of talking to strange snails in alleyways, but if he was going to have his teeth knocked in tomorrow by Jurg, he figured he didn't exactly have much to lose anymore. He and Buns squeezed into the narrow gap and stooped down towards the snail. The snail wore a dingy black coat and a rather chipped shell. He held an old, gnarled wooden cane, with far too many twists and cracks and knots in it to hold any real weight. One of his eyes he kept closed, and his mouth was pressed into a permanent frown.
"The name's Hjort," said the snail. "Pleasure to meet you. Miles, isn't it?"
"How did you know my name?" said Miles.
"Didn't you say it earlier?"
said the snail.
"No."
"Are you sure? Probably overheard you. Mother always did say I had excellent hearing, or something like that."
"Nope," said Miles. "I'm pretty sure I would remember. I didn't say anything."
Well, anyway, who's this?"
said the snail, changing the subject.
"Your pet?"
"Pet? I'm his friend,"
said Buns.
"Jumping bumblebeans!"
exclaimed Hjort.
"It can talk! Well, call me a corn. I thought it was some kind of strange new horse model."
"Hey,"
said Buns.
"Phew! He's not much easier on the ears than he is on the eyes, is he?"
said Hjort. "He's not a horse," said Miles, "and I don't think he appreciates you talking about him like that."
"I'm just trying to help, that's all,"
said Hjort.
"I think I know a doctor who specializes in fellows with afflictions like him. Growths on their face and whatnot, I mean."
"Man, forget this,"
said Buns.
"Let's get out of here, Miles. I don't have to take this from a snail. Besides, I bet dinner will be ready soon. I'm starving."
Wait, croaked the snail. "I still haven't told you my business yet. The word around town is that you're in for a fight tomorrow. A fight you can't win. Well, listen. I've got an offer for you. Something that'll change the whole playing field."
"You've got my interest," said Miles. "But how'd you hear about all this?"
"Word travels quickly in the snail community,"
said the snail, pausing to cough intensely.
"Excuse me. Breathe too much coal dust down in the mines. Nasty stuff, that is. The mines, I mean, not the coal. Anyway, you say that you're intrigued."
"Yeah, I am. I mean, I'd rather not get knocked to Kingdom Come. But what's your offer? I'm not above cheating, but it has to be something that Jurg won't see coming."
"Oh, trust me. Nobody'd ever see this coming. Not even the age-old snail elders of Nergdurgle. And it's far above cheating. It's just smart business, that's all. Anyway, who made up the rules of the fight? Not you. So who says that you've got to follow them? You've got nothing to worry about, my friend."
"All right," said Miles. "Let's see what you've got." The snail closed the eye which had been open and opened the other. Then he leaned forward, lowering his voice barely above a whisper, a single, disturbingly deep note. "I've recently come into possession of a certain valuable object." Miles and Buns held their breath as Hjort reached into his shell and pulled out a playing card. He laid it gently on the dirt for them to see. Miles' eyes grew wide, and Buns even stopped fiddling with his coat. It was by far one of the most beautiful things they had ever seen, far more beautiful than Buns' buttons. The card had gilt edges, a silver face, and little whirling details in crimson and purple all over. But more captivating than its illustrious borders was the exquisite depiction in its center of a pure white suit of armor. Miles whistled. "Wow," both boys said in unison. "Where did you find this?" whispered Buns. The snail chuckled.
"I swiped it off an old woman I met a few towns back. She tried to chase me down, but I was too quick for her."
"Quick?"
said Buns, smiling.
"How's that?"
said the snail, his closed eye flying open. The other one slid closed slowly.
I thought you said quick. I must have misheard.
Why's that?
Well, you're a snail. I don't mean to be rude or anything, but snails aren't quick.
Have you ever seen a snail be quick?
Said the snail, scowling. Or maybe that was how he always looked.
No, said Buns. That's kind of my point.
Well, then you don't really know, do you? Said Hjort. I'm fast as the wind, when I have a mind. Certainly faster than you fat horse thing.
I'd like to see you run, said Buns, crossing his arms.
Sure you would. It's quite a treat, let me tell you, said the snail.
All right, let's see it.
But not just now. Just now I'm not at my best. It's been too soon since my last sprint. You should come back later. I'll show you then.
Maybe I will.
Fine then.
About the card, said Miles. It sure is beautiful, but what can I do with it?
Well, use it, of course.
What do you mean?
Just what I said. It's a magic card. You never seen one before? That's right, I forgot. You strange folk only have magic gum here. Nasty stuff. Cards are much better. Look, you tear it up, and piddly-deek, you get whatever's on the card. White armor. You'll be a knight, just like that, without any of that dubbing or anything.
Whoa. What? Said Miles. That really is something. All right, Hjort. What do you want for it?
I need buttons. Lots of them. And it looks like you've got quite a few.
Hjort nodded towards Buns' jacket.
It's the best deal you'll get for something like this,
said the snail.
What do you need buttons for? Said Buns.
That's my business, said Hjort. You should know it's very rude to ask a snail its business.
How many buttons do you need? Said Miles.
How many do you have?
Said Miles, looking towards Buns.
Hang on, said Buns. These are my buttons. And if I've got to give them up, shouldn't I be the one to get the armor? And besides, it's a new coat anyway.
What he meant by this was that it was new for him. Someone in the town had worn it for a number of years before donating it to clothe the orphans, and so the plaid was heavily patched and quite stretched out as a result. The buttons were some good strong ones, though.
But you're not the one who has to fight Jurg, said Miles. Besides, I'll get you new buttons when this is all done. It'll just be a loan. Come on, you've got to help me here. I'd do the same for you.
Miles wasn't too sure that he would, but he had to convince Buns. It was his only chance. Well, not his only, although he didn't feel very good about the prospect of trying to wrestle Buns' buttons away from him there in the alleyway. Buns reluctantly agreed, and they set about pulling all the buttons from the jacket, laying each carefully before the snail, who frowned approvingly all the while. Then they took the buttons off their pants pockets. Last of all came the buttons to their flies. The orphanage couldn't afford zippered pants. An embarrassing but necessary action. Altogether their collective sum amounted to 12 buttons, some bone, some brass, most round, and one square.
There, said Miles. That's all we've got. Will it be enough?
The snail rubbed his chin thoughtfully.
Well, all right then, he said. I had hoped for more, but this will have to do, I suppose. A pleasure doing business with you, Miles. Sir Miles, I should say. And good day to you, Buns. I hope you find a cure for your ugliness.
And with that, he was gone. Like a dart thrown at a board, he shot down to the end of the alleyway and vanished. Huh, said Miles to himself. I guess he really could be fast if he wanted to.
Well, are you going to use the card?
Said Buns. Miles thought for a moment, then put it in his pocket. Not yet, he said. Probably not till tomorrow.
Why not use it now? Said Buns. I want to see what my buttons bought.
I'd have to hide the armor somewhere if I did that. Anyway, we should be heading back. We'll probably be late for supper as it is. I hope nobody blib-blabs to Ms. Chortle about the fight. And we'll have to keep extra watch out for Thomas. He's always trying to steal stuff out of my pockets when I'm not watching.
But what could Miss Chortle do to stop you? With your armor, I mean, said Buns. Man, you wouldn't have to do anything she says after this. You could leave the orphanage. Not before you get me my buttons back, though.
Maybe I will leave, said Miles slowly, thinking. He had never really wanted to live there, not that he had a choice. But he had gotten tired long ago of all the crowded rooms and endless chores, and the lizards that snuck into their rooms, and the smell of rotting apples and ripe feet. Then there were the rules. Rules that he always bumped into. Rules like not to eat any of the cheese without permission, or not to go biking on Saturdays. He could understand the prohibition for apple bobbing, he supposed, but other things just seemed silly. If he could leave, though, he wouldn't have to worry about any of that. He could find new friends, too. Friends who weren't as ugly as Buns. And he wouldn't have to worry about Thomas anymore, either. As for the buttons, said Miles, I think I've got a good idea of who I'll take them from. Miles closed his hand tightly around the card. He could barely wait for tomorrow. Tomorrow came, and Miles was up before anyone, even before the sun had turned on its giant light. He got dressed and rushed outside to tear up the card. His fingers shook with nervous excitement, and he kept dropping the card. But then he remembered. The fight wasn't until 4 o'clock that afternoon. Munglebuth! He thought he might die from anticipation. It had almost been better when he was the one who was going to be pummeled. He was sweating a lot, under his arms and behind his ears and in between his fingers, and oh, how he wished it was already 4 o'clock. He tried distracting himself by working ahead on his chores, but this did little to ease him. Finally, it was time to go to school. Miles thought he would explode, pop like a bullbladder balloon. At least if he did, he wouldn't have to wait any longer. As the other students came in, they filed past him with somber faces, shaking their heads. They had all heard about that afternoon. He was glad. He wanted them to be there now to see. Soon Buns came in and sat next to Miles. He was beaming from ear to ear, and his chin practically shone. It was still ugly, but now it was bright as well. Finally, Jurg came through the door. A hush fell on the room. Ms. Japple, the teacher, adjusted her glasses and addressed him. "Jurg," she said, "I have heard that there is to be a fight today. Would you know anything about that?" "No, ma'am," said Jurg, shaking his head vehemently. His eyes could plead innocence, but he was rotten to the core. Today Miles was going to throw the rotten apple away, and not just the one that Buns had left in their room still. "Good," said Mrs. Japple. She turned to her lesson, and Jurg smiled at Miles. "You're dead," he mouthed. Never before had Miles tried so hard to pay attention to what the teacher was saying. Anything to keep his mind occupied and his heart from drumming itself into oblivion. That day they were going over long division. Or at least, that's how Miles understood it. Ms. Japple said that 8 divided by 2 wasn't long division, but it sure took Miles a long time to figure it, especially with something weighing on his mind, as it was now. Finally, though, the bell monkey rang the bell. It was 3:30, time for school to let out. Jurg grabbed Miles by the collar as all the children ran out the door. "Going somewhere?" he said. "I've got to use the bathroom," Miles stammered for a convenient excuse. "Yeah, I'll bet. Wouldn't want to wet yourself in front of everyone," Jurg laughed. "You better be there." "I will," said Miles. He pulled free from Jurg and ran towards the woods, with Buns following him. "Keep watch and make sure nobody's coming," said Miles, as the 2 boys ducked behind a large clump of shrubbery. Several squirrels had set up a witch trial behind the bushes, but when they saw the boys, they all scattered in a panic, and the witch escaped with her arms full of acorns. Sure, said Buns. "Just hurry up and rip it." Miles nodded. His fingers tingled as he held the card. Without another thought, he tore the card from one end down to the other. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the 2 halves of the card disappeared with a flash. His feet began itching violently. The feeling spread quickly to his shins and up his legs, like a tiny flame touching an oiled paper. In a moment, his entire body burned as if he had been bitten by ants all over. Perhaps he was allergic to magic.
Then his bones all started to shake and rattle and ache, as if they were stretching. He looked down at his feet, and it seemed like they were growing further away. His head felt lighter, but also incredibly tight, as if the weight of a flood was crashing onto it. He held up his hands, and they began to stretch away from him. Suddenly, his vision narrowed, blackening until he could see only a narrow sliver of grass. He reached up to his head and touched cold metal. Feeling around, he realized it was a helmet. His hands moved to his chest and arms, but he could no longer feel these with his fingertips. Instead, there was the slight tinkly ring of metal. His hands were now enclosed in white gauntlets. Peering through the tiny slit which the helm allowed him, he saw that his whole body was encased in snow-white armor. Miles laughed shakily. Could this be real? He lifted his arms and legs, reveling in the weighty power the metal brought him. He was certainly much taller than he had been before. He felt invincible. Oh, it was wonderful! He really needed to talk to snails more often. Buns stood in awe, his mouth hanging open and his eyes bulging even more than his chin. "Oh man, oh man, oh man!" he kept saying over and over. Miles pounded his fists together with a loud clank. It was showtime. The old mill lay on the extreme edge of town, near the durg nests in the sand dunes. It was not too far from the schoolhouse, but in order to get to it without being seen, Miles and Buns had to take the long way around and cut through quite a segment of the woods. Not used to being so tall, Miles kept banging his head on low branches. Of course, the helmet protected him from any damage this might have caused, and the magic gauntlets gave him enough strength to easily smash any small obstacles out of his way. After around 15 minutes, the mill came within sight. Already there was a large gathering of children bunched up around its back. "They must be wondering where I am by now," said Miles, his voice carrying a metallic echo from the helmet. "They must be wondering where I am by now," said Miles, his voice carrying a metallic echo from the helmet. "Let's not keep them waiting." He exited the woods with long, lumbering strides. Buns had to jog to keep up with him. At first, all the children were focused on the center of the circle they had formed, where Jurg and his stooges were. But quickly, some began to notice the giant, steel-clad figure approaching. In a few moments, the entire crowd had turned towards Miles. The color drained from many of the onlookers' faces, and some of the younger children screamed and began to run away. Jurg may try to run, but he won't get far, thought Miles to himself. A core group seemed to be holding their ground, however. In their midst stood Jurg, who looked now like a sheet of paper that was about to blow over in the wind. A freshly bitten onion sat at his feet, with the hand that had held it still standing open and quivering a little. Miles, who towered over them all, came to a stop a few paces from the gathering. "Well, Jurg," he said, "here I am. You still want to fight me?" "What?" said Jurg. "I never said I wanted to fight you, sir. Honest, I didn't. There must be some terrible mistake. Isn't there, everyone?" Jurg's companions all heartily agreed, but the other children that remained, many of whom Jurg had bullied before, shook their heads. Miles laughed. "But you dig, Jurg. It's me, Miles." Jurg's eyes bulged and his face contorted. Sometimes he looked almost as ugly as Buns. "That's right," Buns said. "That there's Miles, all right. Not so tough now, are you, Jurg? Now that he's got armor." Jurg shook his head and laughed uneasily. "You expect me to believe that's Miles? Come off it, Buns. I don't know what's going on, or who's inside that armor, but the real Miles better show up soon, or else there'll be more trouble for him. Whatever clever prank this is, it isn't going to pay off. I'm not afraid of you, whoever it is in that armor. You can stand there threatening all you like, but we both know you won't hurt me." "That's where you're wrong, Jurg," said Miles. Before anyone could move, or even think, Miles shot his arm out, quick as a flash. There was a tremendous crash, and most of the kids who had remained scattered, yelping like pups running from a dog gobbler.
Jurg caught Miles' blow with the fat part of one of his flabby cheeks. He took several steps back, reeling, before falling backwards with a thud onto the ground. He didn't move.
"You killed him!"
cried one of Jurg's goons. They crowded around him, trying to prop him back up onto his feet, but he was limp as a noodle.
"I didn't kill him," said Miles.
"I didn't hit him that hard. He's probably just knocked out. Look, he's still breathing." Suddenly, Miles heard another voice.
"What is the meaning of this? What is going on?"
it said. It was Miss Japple. She was walking around the side of the mill. A small group of children had rallied around her, wanting to see what she would do. They pointed towards Miles and shouted over each other, giving numerous conflicting reports. But Miles hardly noticed them. His attention was on the 2 town constables who walked beside Miss Japple. Evidently, she had anticipated there being a fight, and had decided it would be best to bring backup. The constables wore absurdly tall green hats, probably intended to make them seem taller and more intimidating. They were always wrinkled, though, and the effect was thus more of wearing an old sock on one's head rather than shock or awe. In any case, all the adults were shocked at the sight of a white, armor-clad figure standing over Jurg's motionless body. There was a terrible moment of silence, as Miles and the adults both evaluated the situation. Then the constables raised their truncheons above their heads and ran towards him. "You there!" they cried. "In the white! Stop at once!" Miles decided it wasn't the best time for a conversation. If Jurg and the other children hadn't believed him, he doubted the adults would either. Besides, they might try to take away his armor. He spun and ran as quickly as he could. His legs were longer now, but he was also heavier, and the prolonged stress had tired him out quite a bit.
"Wait for me!"
said Buns, huffing and puffing behind. Miles looked back just in time to see one of the constables grab Buns, as Miss Japple stooped over Jurg. The other constable still followed him, and Miles sprinted towards the woods. He crashed through the trees, arms furiously parting the branches so his tin can head could pass through unhindered. He ran and ran, not daring to look back, thinking all the time that the constable would be right behind him. However, he realized that his pursuer's cries were growing steadily quieter behind him. Soon, he could not hear him at all. He kept running. Finally, Miles slowed and came to a stop. He was sweating profusely and out of breath. Reaching up, he tried to remove his helmet, but it seemed to be stuck. He pulled on it, but it wouldn't budge. He tried twisting it. Nothing. He banged on it, bucked it, stroked it, and struck it. He even tried voice commands like, "Helmet off," or "Remove helmet." Still nothing. He decided to take the gauntlets off so he could feel around more effectively with his fingers, perhaps for a button or a tiny clasp or something. But he found that he could not remove the gauntlets either. Now Miles really started to panic. What was he going to do? His throat was burning with thirst, and his head felt light. His heart and lungs thudded in his chest, and his stomach was twisting itself into never-before-invented styles of knots. He needed to sit down and let his nerves settle. He rested against the back of a tree, but his mind would not stop racing. He could not believe all that had just happened. It was certainly not how he had envisioned the day going, even when he had expected it to progress poorly. Before, he had just faced being beat up, an undesirable but known outcome. But now, who knew what would happen? Something bad, but exactly what, he couldn't guess. As it was, Miles didn't see how he could do anything. He was terribly thirsty, and starting to be hungry as well. He could not remove the armor himself, which now seemed much more of a curse than a blessing, and he could not return to the town to find someone to help him. The constables would be out searching for him. Everything had seemed so perfect in his head, but it was all working out so terribly. Why had he ever trusted that slime ball of a snail? Thanks to him, Miles was probably wanted for murder now. They must be drawing up wanted posters for him even then. But surely Jurg couldn't be dead. Miles had seen him breathing, he thought. He didn't even want to think about what trouble he had gotten Buns into. He couldn't get his buttons back now, the ones he had loved so much. Now his hands would have nothing to fiddle with while they kept him in the dungeon for questioning. These new agonies were even worse than waiting for the fight. Finally, Miles' nerves had had enough, and he broke down into sobs. But he couldn't even remove his helmet to wipe the tears away, and was left only to gulp the salty drops as they slid down to the corners of his mouth. "Knights don't cry," he told himself. But he was no knight. He was just a silly, stupid boy who had gotten tricked by a snail. A snail! Why had he ever wanted to be a knight? It was all too much to bear. When Miles woke, he realized that he had been sleeping. How long, he did not know, but it now looked like it was late in the evening. The golden light filtered through the trees and warmed his cold, metal-clad legs. Miles raised his hand to wipe his face from the remains of the dried tears and snot, but as his hand clinked against his helmet, he remembered his situation, his mind stumbling through the fog of his sleep. He was still thirsty, terribly so, and was beginning to be hungry too, but the cry and sleep had done wonders for his nerves. Miles stood up slowly and looked around him. His joints felt stiff and sore, and he gave a great yawn and stretched. Now he must make some sort of decision regarding how he was going to find water. He could wander through the woods in search of a creek or pool to drink from, or he could try to find his way back to town. When night fell, perhaps he could sneak into the well, or to the troughs used to water the pigs and the peccanegs. Of course, now he was not sure of the way back to town exactly. He thought he remembered which way he had come, but the trees were all starting to look the same. One direction would do as well as another at this rate, so he began walking in the direction he was facing. He was bound to get somewhere sooner or later, even if he had to walk all the way to the edge of the world. That was somewhere, at least. He had only taken a few steps when suddenly he heard a voice. The voice. The snail voice. The one that sounded like pine sap and anchovies. Sure enough, there sat Hjort the snail, perched up on a small boulder that a tree was growing out of. He no longer wore a tattered old cloak, but instead a rather nicely fitted waistcoat. He also seemed to have gotten a new shell, one that was a lusty green color, girt around by bone buttons.
"Hey, kid! Hey, Miles!" he said, beckoning him over.
Miles approached.
"I heard it didn't work out so well for you with the armor," said the snail. "That you socked the kids something awful, and the cops got involved. Listen, I'm sorry it all shook out that way, but I'm glad that I've found you now. I realized I probably forgot to tell you that once you put the armor on, you can't take it off. That's my bad. I got a little too excited there, I think. But listen, I've got a deal to help you out. I still have another of those cards I swapped from the old woman. This one's a reversing card. It undoes whatever the last magic card you tore did. What do you say? Pretty good deal, no?"
"What's the trade?" said Miles.
"Oh, not much. I feel bad about not warning you earlier. I just needed those buttons awful bad. I'll let you have the card in exchange for the armor card back. I might give being a knight a try for a while."
The snail took the undo card out of his shell and laid it out on the stone, adjusting his new monocle.
"What do you say?" he said.
Miles reached out to take the card. Before his fingers touched it, though, he stopped and drew back slowly. "Wait a minute," he said. "Last time there was a catch to the card. I couldn't take the armor off. What's it going to be this time?"
"It's nothing serious,"
said the snail, half shading his open eye and looking down.
"Not really. Sometimes it won't undo all the effects of a card, but the most important ones, sure. And of course you'll have hives for a few weeks, but I figure it's worth it for you."
Miles laughed. "You figure it's worth it for me? What do you know, snail?"
"Quite a lot," said the snail, smiling. "More than most think. I know you can't go back to the town like that, because they'll be looking for you. I also know you are probably very thirsty by now, and there's no water nearby, so you'll have to go back to the town. I'm the only chance you've got, kid."
"I thought you were my only chance earlier today," said Miles. "And look how that's landed me."
"Well, you did get revenge on your bully."
At some cost. It comes down to this, Snail. I don't trust you. Sure, maybe I'll get turned back. If the card even works, you said it might not. And be able to go back to town. But there's no way Ms. Chortle hasn't heard about all this. So I'll be stuck in timeout for goodness knows how long. I'll be doing double, triple chores for the rest of my life. And the constables will probably be asking lots of questions besides. And if all that finally passes, I've still got Jurg to worry about. I know how he is with taking revenge. And all that is if the magic works like you say it will. I know how that'll go down, though. I'll be stuck with part of the armor still on, or have a stretched-out body that can't be fixed. And hives? No. No deal. The only deal you'll get from me is that I'm not going to crush your shell and take my buttons back right now. You're lucky I don't have any salt, either.
You've got me all wrong, kid,
said the snail, trying his best to look apologetic.
I just want to help.
Well, thanks for all the help, said Miles. But I figure I'm better enough on my own for this one. He reached forward, placing his fist against the boulder and pulling his fingers back.
Wait,
said the snail, panicking.
I could lead you to the crone that made the cards. She lives in the woods by the...
Miles flicked the snail off with a satisfying clud. Several buttons came flying off the shell as the tiny gastropod went sailing, rolling down the rock and onto the ground. Miles picked one of the buttons up and held it in his palm. Buttons, he muttered to himself. Thanks to a few buttons, he now had everything he had ever thought he wanted. He was out of the orphanage, Jurg wouldn't give him any more trouble, and he had an impenetrable suit of armor. He was taller, too. But now he wished he could exchange all of that for what he had before. Wished that the snail's offer could have been real. But no. He had what the buttons had bought him, and he was going to stick to it. He closed his hand around the button and swallowed his dry saliva. He had made his bed, and now he was going to eat it, too. And so into the woods the white knight strode. The end. Thank you so much for listening to today's story from The Whim. I hope you will consider following this podcast, giving it a review, and sharing it with your friends or family. I'm Jonathan Sorsey, and I'll see you at the next crossroads. Until then, farewell, and don't let the Narramites nibble.